Hello and welcome to WordPress Translation Day. As you may know, WordPress Translation Day this year is taking place over the course of the entire month of September. So we've had local events being planned, local mini Translation Day events being planned since September 1st, and they are ongoing until the end of the month. If you haven't joined, or if you haven't seen if your local community has organized an event, you can find those on wptranslationday.org. Those are being added regularly. They're still being organized, so do keep an eye out on that website for more information. Or if you don't see your local community there and you would like to organize an event, you can still submit those as well. There is still time. For today, starting on September 17th until September 30th, which is International Translation Day itself, we have a series of global events happening as well. And this is our third global live streaming event that we're having, which is an opportunity for us to come together, have some presentations, projects, ways to contribute globally to Translation Day and figure out new ways to get involved. There are live streaming events like this one. There are sprints happening this week, and there are also asynchronous ways to get involved as well. All of that information as well is on the website at the link that you can see below me right now. And again, this will be happening until September 30th, though. So if you are interested in getting involved, if you haven't participated just yet, there is still plenty of time. So with that, I will introduce our event for today. We have 4 panelists, 4 experienced translators and contributors to open source projects with us here today, who are going to be talking about their experience. And I'm particularly excited about this panel. I think within the WordPress community, from locale to locale, there's so many different ways to participate in translation and organize translations within your community. And I think that experience for each community can be so different. And it's such a great opportunity to learn from each other and see how people do things differently, what we can take from each other, practices that work well, tools that work well, things like that. And so one of the things that I know that I always enjoy in particular about WordPress Translation Day is even if we're not all attending each other's local events for various reasons, whether that's time zone or language or whatever that may be, I always find it really nice just seeing on Twitter and different social media, seeing everyone come together and just having an opportunity to be reminded of just how global this project is and how big of a project it is to translate WordPress into other languages. So with that in mind, in terms of creating opportunities to connect and learn from each other, we have 2 contributors from the WordPress community who contribute to multiple locales. And they will be talking about their experience with WordPress, how they got started, and just sharing their 2 perspectives on what it can mean to be a polyglot within the WordPress community. Beyond that, which I'm excited about as well, we have 2 contributors from other open source projects outside of WordPress. So we're really expanding and learning from even more open source communities here today. We have a contributor from Mozilla and also from Hyperledger Fabric, and they will also be sharing with us their experience about how they got started, as well as how things work in their local communities and different things that they've learned being involved in a community-driven or open source translation community. And I'm really looking forward to hearing just what everyone has to share, and also what ideas and information can come from this today, and what we're going to learn from each other. So I will keep this introduction pretty short. I'm just going to take a moment now to ask everyone to introduce themselves. And Zay, I was wondering if we could start with you.
Oh, really? Because I'm oldest, I suppose. My name is Zay. If you are in the WordPress polyglots community, you probably know me by now. I've coordinated the team for a few years, but I started mostly as a translator for the Portuguese version of WordPress back in version 1.5, I think, or at least 2.0. So since then, aside from my gig at the Polyglots team, I have contributed to the translations of the software. At the beginning, it was just me and someone else, and now we have a few dozen contributors to the project, which is great, given given the amount of work that's to do. It's very good news. So we have a well-functioning team after a while, and that's basically me in WordPress as far as languages go.
Thank you so much, Zay. I love hearing starting with version 1. I forget, did you say 1.5?
1.5, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's just amazing to hear, knowing that we're at version 5. Almost at version 5.9. So Zay has contributed quite a lot in this time. Awesome. Well, I will move on to Satomi, if you don't mind, if I can ask you to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you, Erika. My name is Satomi. Thank you very much for giving me to join this discussion. And I'm from Hyperledger Fabric Documentation Group for Japanese language. My job is a web app programmer, so I know WordPress a little, but today's not as a part of Hyperledger Group, but sometimes I advise about technology aspect to small and medium companies. I'm very looking forward to hearing from other panelists today. Very nice to see you.
Thank you so much. I thank you for being here too. I'm excited to hear from you. Great. We'll move on to Mikhail, if you can introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Mikhail. Thank you, and thanks to the WordPress community for inviting me here. I'm here because I contribute as a volunteer to the Mozilla localization, specifically to the Czech language. I started around year 2010, something like that. Since then, I contributed to more projects than just Mozilla, but Mozilla for me is the main driver for the whole time. Originally, I started on the support forums, then I moved to websites, to Mozilla websites, and later I was asked, hey, can you help us also with the products? And I started with Thunderbird, and now I mostly translate Firefox as the browser.
Awesome, thank you so much. And Ali, I'll go to you if you can introduce yourself as well.
So hi, my name is Ali. I'm from Mexico, and I have been contributing to the WordPress translation group, the Polyglot, since probably 2012, maybe 2014, and but I recently became really active 5 years ago. And I am involved in a few groups, in a few languages. I'm mostly involved in the Japanese local and the Spanish from Mexico local. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. This is my first translation day event, so looking forward to it.
Great, thank you, Ali. Thank you all so much for being here today. It's actually even just from your introductions, it's really exciting for me to hear for some of you just how long you've been contributing to these communities and how that's even changed over time from when you first got started to now. And I think at least for myself, I'll speak for myself, but I'm sure it's not an experience unique to me. I think it can be a little overwhelming or even scary to get started at times, especially when you see people around you who have a lot of experience and who in many ways act as mentors for a lot of people. And I think seeing long-term contributors is very inspiring for others as well, and kind of figuring out, okay, how do I get started? How do I build this? If that is a goal of yours. So I'm going to use that as a transition. And I think, Mikhail, if you don't mind, if I start with you again, I'd like to know a little bit more about how did you get started with translating? How did you find the project? What made you say, yes, I would like to volunteer my time to contribute to this?
The very beginning was that maybe 12 years ago, my Internet Explorer stopped working properly. So I was looking for an alternative, different browser, and asked for recommendations. And I chose Firefox to be the replacement. I liked it. It was originally translated to Czech. But I started also looking for other similar products. And I found one called InstantBird. It was an instant messaging client. And that one, at that time, was only in English. So I started translating it to Czech. And of course, I did it completely wrong. It was like terrible. I don't like that very much. But through the local support forum, I got connected with the localization community, with the Czech team. And they said like, hey, it's a nice start, but maybe you can improve this and that. And that way I basically got connected to them. And later when people were leaving the team, life happens. I'm also sometimes less active than I used to be. I slowly transitioned and got to more projects and get the experience that I have today.
So I think you unmuted yourself. So if you would like to talk a little bit about your experience too, and tack on to Mikhail's
Did I mute myself?
Unmute, yeah. You're good.
So the question for me, yeah, how I started, I kind of disagree with you, at least in my specific case. Oh, it's so hard to get started. It was literally a scratch your own itch, like Mikhail's maybe. I installed WordPress for some reason. I can't remember which. And I thought, oh, I need to have this in Portuguese. And there was kind of a translation available, half done. And I thought, well, this is not good. I need this in Portuguese. So I tried to get in touch with the person who had done it. I had no luck. To this day, no luck. So I told myself, okay, we need to translate this in Portuguese. I went to the mailing list. There were no P2s and no teams and no nothing of the kind. There was literally a mailing list. And it so happens the day before, some guy from Portugal had posted, I want to translate. And I said, okay, I'll do it with you. So the getting started was not scary at all. We thought, oh, we can take care of this in 3 days flat, no problem. And then it gets scary afterwards when you're suddenly facing 1,000, I don't know how many strings, and you, oh my God, how do I translate this? And it was terrible. The first translation was awful, it was god-awful. So, but since then, so that's how I got started. It was a scratch your own itch kind of situation, literally. There was no noble purpose behind this. There was no, I am going to contribute out of the goodness of my heart because I'm such a good person. No. So I need this, it doesn't exist, I will do it.
I love that. I actually for both you and Mikhail too, it's I think both of you in a way started in a way with wanting to scratch your own itch. You translate something that you were using. And I think, that's such a great point. And also that it can start terrible, and it's okay too. That's why we have communities. It gets better. That's how you learn. And
you know what the most surprising bit of this was? I'd look at the Portuguese translation of WordPress and thinking, okay, this is half done. So nobody actually uses this. Nobody actually needs this. The moment we started publicly releasing translations, we had a mountain of people saying, no, wait, this is not well translated. This is not the way it's done. I needed to be something different. And I thought, where were all these people before? Now they come out of the woodwork. So I basically told them, put up or shut up. Either contribute or and that's when you find a community.
Exactly.
That there actually is one.
Exactly. Well, I'm wondering for Ali or Satomi if you have, if your start was similar, if it was something that you were using WordPress, you wanted to see it in your language, or in Satomi's case, not WordPress, but if it was more of a, I'm using this, I want to see documentation or software available in my language, or if your start was a little bit different.
I'm sorry, I can't understand your question. Please repeat that again.
Sure. Yeah, for getting started with Hyperledger Fabric, what inspired you to get started?
It's a very personal reason. As someone says that very interesting in the Hyperledger. Basically, Hyperledger Fabric is blockchain technology, so I'm interested in the blockchain. So that is one reason to start to translate. And also, I have a meetup group for Hyperledger in Japan. So yeah, I have a connection to. I can get a connection to Linux Foundation Japan. So yeah, they introduce some opportunities for me. So that is beginning my community.
Awesome, thank you. Ali, I don't want to put you on the spot. If you have anything you'd like to share as well, if not, I have a lot of questions for all of you today. So we can definitely start to go through some of those as well. I think,
my story is like way more boring than everyone else's. I guess it's okay. Well, I should just mention that contributing to open source translations actually helps with a lot of like resume building. You start knowing a lot of people, and that kind of people eventually lead you to other translation related stuff. Like you may contribute one day to just one string, but you eventually can end up translating a whole product by yourself. So that's sort of how it happened to me.
That's great. I don't think that's boring at all. I actually think that's really, it's really interesting to hear too, kind of when you get started translating, in some cases, it can be, you're looking to translate a product that you use and you just want it available in your language. And then that's when, like Zay said, there's people who could just come out of the woodwork and you realize other people want this too. Other people are using this as well. And I'm actually going to use that, Ali, to kind of bring up another question that I have for you all, which is what keeps you coming back to translating, knowing that I would guess for all of these projects, there's as much work or as little work as you want, but what makes you come back to keep contributing?
Who's going to answer first? I'll go.
Cool.
I'll go. So what keeps me coming back? I don't know if this is true for everybody. There's a certain amount of obsession in once you've translated or contributed to the translation of something, a certain obsession, at least with me, develops with seeing new translations and thinking, wait a minute, no, this is not exactly correct. So you either correct it and you're contributing again, or you go back to the places where you can discuss those things, and you find yourself in the middle of a conversation. And this is pretty much like going to the same place where you have breakfast and know everyone. Why do you go to that place? Well, because it's the place you know and the people you know and the conversations you like to have. You have fine-tuned your social interactions with these people. You're at ease. You can banter. You can talk seriously. So basically, the reason I come back, aside from the obsession with making sure it's properly translated, is basically it's enough foundation for me. That's why I come back.
I like that. You have your community. I think Petya had said in our opening live streaming event for this year that I forget how she phrased it, but it was just she came to WordPress and then she stayed for the people, and just kind of highlighting this community aspect here and those relationships that you build just from contributing, and that goes back to what you said, Ali, too, as well, in terms of the people you get to know and how that evolves over time. And I will leave that open to anyone else as well. Just I'm going to keep an eye on your mute buttons, and I will probably call you once I see you unmute. But for the rest of you, what keeps you contributing? What makes you go back to doing this work?
For me, it's now the very same as for Zé. Like, I met a lot of people through localization, and I like still to meet them. And I also want, in my case, Firefox to stay in Czech. So I try to do my best to keep it on a decent quality and keep it in Czech. But for the first 2 years, it was very different for me. For the first 2 years, it was that I can boast before my friends that I do something for that famous big company. That like, hey, what's the browser on your computer? And half of the time it was Firefox, and I could say like, yeah, you use like my browser. I helped to build it the way you use it. So that's maybe even more selfish from me than when I started. That I want something for myself to work. I was like posting before others and showing them like, hey, I can do something.
Oh, I like that. I think it highlights the when you contribute, there's an impact on other people as well. And whether you feel pride because someone's using your translations, or if you want to call it a selfless contribution as well. I think it's very valuable to you, though, to see when you are contributing. Hey, this is meaningful for other people as well. I think that's a really good point. Satami, I saw that you had unmuted as well. Do you have something to share?
Yeah, my opinion is a little similar to Mikhail. My community is just 1 year old, so I don't have a lot of tips, but that community made me think about the need for translation in my country. So I think some people might think studying English is a better way to get a cutting-edge technology. But in my opinion, the purpose of translation is slightly different from way of getting new technology. So I think my Japanese translation studying is very helpful, more back up the developers in my countries.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that is also a great point in terms of making it more making the technology more accessible as well.
Well, in my case, it's a bit of everything. I started translating in Japanese because to me it was like a practice. Part of like contributing to an open source team, it means that you are doing it for free, but at the same time you're getting a lot of feedback because there are a lot of volunteers and people doing that anyway. But when I started doing it for Mexican Spanish, which is my like native locale because I'm Mexican, it meant a bit more because living in like a variation locale, which is like variation from Spanish from Spain, you sort of don't have that identity in your own locale, right? When you use Spanish from Spain, you understand it, but at the same time, you recognize that's not your, like where you come from, what you speak, what you understand. So once you start contributing to shaping that identity into the product itself, I think that's what makes you coming around and continue contributing as much as possible.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that as well in terms of really identifying with the project. And we had a few
Can I add
conversations.
something to this? Can I add something to Ali? Because I wanted to tell her that
Absolutely.
from the polyglots community, the way it started, amazingly, you would think that the bigger languages would be the more eager ones to translate. Actually, in many cases, the smaller communities were the ones most eager as a way of affirming cultural identity. You know, like the Basques or the Catalans or the, you know, all of those variations that define a region or a culture, the smaller they get, the more vocal they get because they are afraid of being run over by some other, you know, mother language, let's call it, which is not a thing, but anyway, not figured. So Ali, I think, you know, kudos for the Mexican Spanish translation. I have a problem with the term Mexican Spanish because it's a complete misnomer for what the language is. But you know, thank you for that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's oh sorry. It's kind of difficult, especially because Mexico has so many languages, and but I'm speaking about the case of Spanish in particular because it's the only one I can speak and I can understand. And what Saebe said is completely true. Like, if you see the communities from Latin America, like Ecuador and Venezuela and everyone else, is like they defend their locale as much as I would do with mine. So that sort of need of an identity, I think, is what makes you want to stay as well.
and I think I would probably for some communities in WordPress, I don't want to speak for all, but I know I've seen with other kind of open source translation projects, it can be also an excellent opportunity to preserve your language too. And I know, I mean, with WordPress, we have 205 locales now that are supported for translation. And I think with some of those, some of them are huge languages, and some are much smaller. And I think it's such a great opportunity to kind of keep those languages alive too, with the new technology, and kind of keeping it available to people on a day-to-day basis when you're using WordPress. I think that's a really great point. I'm going to jump into a totally different question and get a little bit more maybe a little bit more technical. But I'm curious, I know probably for a lot of people watching, we have a good idea of how translations work within the WordPress community. I'd like to possibly start with either Mikhail or Satomi. If you can describe how translations work for your community, what does that process look like? Let's see.
Oh, okay. Let me answer that. How do the translations work in our community? Well, I can only speak for the Czech community because I know that different language teams in Mozilla use a different workflow. But we kind of try to do what Mozilla supports officially or what Mozilla suggests. And that is we use a web interface. It's called Pontoon. It's kind of similar to GlotPress. That we use for submitting suggestions. Anyone can actually submit the suggestion. Just go there, open Firefox or Firefox for Android, find something that is not translated or find something that you don't like how it's translated, and suggest your own translation. Then there is someone who we call them like actual translators or managers who need to like verify that this is correct. It can be me, it can be someone else, and these teams like differ per locale. And for each locale, once someone approves this suggestion as, yeah, this is the way we want to translate, it can go and show up in the product or show live on the website, if it's the website that is being translated. But I know that some teams use GitHub, for example, because they like how they can discuss that and that they can approve changes in like bigger bulks. Like they can consistently change 20, 30 files with the translations at once.
For our community, we use a GitHub repository that whole our Hyperledger Fabric project. All of Hyperledger Fabric project is on the GitHub. So I think it's everyone knows it's the same as usual code reviewing. So we have one repository for translating translated document. So anyone can show the issues or pull requests. And for example, I want to have finished translate one file. I send a pull request and in my and merged by masters, but it's a rule. It depends on each language community. So in Japanese translation group, we have two roles. One is a translator, another is a reviewer. Reviewer usually have high experience of Hyperledger Fabric, so it's a keep to quality high. And so, and after merging our translations, it comes up automatically on the website. It's our website. It's built with Sphinx, and that update system is built by core documentation members. So each member doesn't have to direct maintain the website. All language translators have to do is to keep its file format and not to destroy its structure.
Awesome. Thank you both. I think, and this is probably not surprising, but I think it's interesting to hear both of you speak about also that reviewing process, which I know is a big part of WordPress translations as well, in terms of checking for quality and consistency and giving feedback to. And I'd like to kind of expand that question and bring in both Ali and Zay a little bit. If there's any tools or tips that you have around that process as well. Knowing that both of you are, and Ali in particular, I know that you're a translator for Japanese, but also you review for Mexican Spanish. So yeah, I'm curious if either of you have particular tools that you use kind of in your experience in general, just contributing, or if you also have tips in terms of that process that we know within the WordPress community for reviewing, knowing that sometimes, I'm sure on a given day you could review hundreds of translations, hundreds of suggestions, and if there's anything there that you found particularly helpful.
Well, in my case, for the Japanese team, is like they have the most robust, comprehensive, amazing documentation ever. So obviously, it leaves very small room for errors when you have so much documentation and stuff available to help you. In the case of the Japanese team, they even have their own Slack channel for that. They have their own like sort of wiki with rules and all that stuff that you should use, the way of like constructing sentences and which formality to use if you can use like certain words in this or that. However, in Mexican Spanish, we had to build all that from zero because we didn't have like such a structure for our translations or to build uniformity among them. So with the other local manager, who is Abraham, if you're watching this, hi, he's amazing. With him, we basically coordinated in our Slack channel to build our own glossary and style guide from scratch. And we also checked for identity and like the words we normally use, because, for example, Abraham is from the sort of center area from Mexico, and I'm from the north. So we found out that me being from the north, I use more English words in my day-to-day than he does. But he doesn't exactly use the Spanish words for that either. So we basically made our own dictionary from scratch, our own glossary and all that. And we also use that consistency tool that is available for WordPress translators, which is free. And I'm surprised that a lot of people haven't heard of it, but it's an amazing tool. In case you have never heard of it, look for it. It's awesome, actually, if you're starting in translations. And for agency work, I work with an agency as well, and we translate plugins and themes, and they have really good tools, even for people that are not like into the community itself of translation and translators. But that tool can help them manage their translations even like more efficient. And I think that kind of tools that are sort of based on the original WordPress concept have evolved a lot, and fortunately are very useful and kind of more automated in a way, in which you don't have to wait for releases and all that to happen. Sometimes they push them into production automatically, and that helps a lot.
Well, I don't think I have much to add to Ali, actually, since we're both WordPress people. We probably do it the same way. So we have a team We work obviously mostly on translate.wordpress.org. That's where everything's kept. We did develop a glossary and a dictionary and translation rules. So the tools we use would typically be, aside from what you'd expect from online dictionaries and stuff like that, our own glossary, our own dictionary, our own translation rules. We have an added complication, which is formally, the language has changed. There has been a new, what they call orthographic agreement that changes the spelling and some of the expressions of the language. And this is a contentious situation in Portuguese, so we have to actually keep two translations because some people want to use the older, which we call the correct one, version of Portuguese, and other people want to use the new version of. So we have to keep them both. We have developed. I had nothing to do with it, but someone in the community developed a tool to convert the old version to the new version. So we use that a lot because we have to keep both translations going on. The most powerful tools we have on our team are not actually tools at all, are people, because we have a lead who's a grace in person and a very, very, very steady hand in leading the team, who is Pedro Mendoza, who I cannot thank enough. And we are lucky to have an actual linguist, or more than one, an actual linguist, Albert Goins, on the team, who is very punctilious about how to translate stuff. So the combination of that solves most of our problems. It doesn't solve what's probably a problem for everyone else, which is volume. The sheer volume of stuff to translate. That's the problem that we don't really know how to solve yet.
Yeah.
So that's basically how we do it.
Awesome. Yeah, I like what you said, that I think in some ways it goes without saying, and in many ways it doesn't. The greatest tool is just the people, which isn't a tool, but is the community, and it's the people who make this happen. So I would like to pause before moving on to another question, just to say, for anyone watching, if you have questions for our panelists today, please do feel free to share that in the YouTube chat. And we have about a little more than 15 more minutes left in this session, so we could probably take a few of your questions. So please do share those. And in the meantime, I will just kind of, jumping off of what both Zay and Ali had said about kind of the review process and the process for, I think, Zay, with having two different versions of Portuguese. Yeah. I'm curious for anyone, obviously anyone on the screen right now, but I think that raises an interesting point too. And Ali, your talk with how just with Abraham being from the central part of Mexico and you being from the north, that there's differences in how you speak as well, and that comes out in translations. For all of you, I'm wondering when deciding on terminology or when creating resources like a glossary or a dictionary, what does that process look like? How do you, if there is a disagreement or someone raises a question of, I don't think that this is the best term to use for this, how do you typically handle that? And how does that usually work in your language or your community?
Well, in my own community, can be a bit different from the others because mine is kind of smaller and newer of sorts than everyone else's. But so far what we have done is just like basically asking everyone who is active about it. Mexican Spanish uses a lot of Anglicisms and like words that are acquired directly from English and sort of modified in a way to use in Spanish, right? whereas the actual Spanish team doesn't do that. I think that's kind of a really thin line to walk in, because that doesn't mean that it's correct most of the time. That's why we try to ask everyone about it. We have people from other countries also contributing into Mexican Spanish as well. And we ask them about what they use and all that. And we try to reach a common point that is both respectful of the basis of the language, but at the same time that is up to date with what we use, because a lot of words are not really used by us anymore. But at the same time, we are not comfortable enough to change it in a way that it ends up in a product. Maybe if it were a day-to-day thing, or like a conversational thing, it will be fine. But since this makes it into the actual usage of a product, we are really careful to not overstep either one of those both, like those sides, either make it so hip of sorts that we end up borrowing words that are not exactly what we need, but also not exactly keeping it from the original language, because colonization is one thing, but now we have used our own language of sorts to make it to make everything our own. So we try to make a balance on that area. At the same time, for example, mentioned about like formality and all that stuff. In Mexico, there's a really interesting conversation going on right now about neutrality, not speaking in female or male exactly. That's a very interesting conversation that's going on right now. I believe we will eventually have to tackle that, but we haven't really started that yet. But the way languages that have genders and numbers are being handled right now, and they are going to a very interesting direction. Japanese doesn't have that issue, and that's why I always say that Japanese is like the best language in the world. No numbers, no genders. That's amazing. It saves you a lot of trouble. But in Latin derived languages like Spanish and French and all that, it's an interesting conversation going on right now, and hopefully we see it reflected on software eventually.
No, Japanese language is not perfect. Yeah, can I explain my languages? Japanese language usually have 3 characters. Uses 3 characters. So one of them can explain the sound directly. So we sometimes confuse the which is translate to Japanese or original Japanese words, or just explain the sound. So it's a one of the terrible things to translate in my language. So yeah, we have the kind of dictionary first. We are going to make we made the dictionary first. So some new words coming. If some words comes, we are going to discuss, and some contributor of Hyperledger Fabric helps us to which is the fit or not for wide range of Japanese developers.
I mean, Ali, you know what? We gave up on the informal version of Portuguese, because that would mean we'd have to keep 4 versions of the language. There's just no way. On the note of ungendered translations, I would strongly recommend you get a hold of one of the historic German polyglots, Caspar Hübinger, who has a whole series of blog posts on that very subject, which, as you can imagine, for German, it's not a simple question. So Caspar Hübinger, I'll post the tweet I have for you to patch that, if I can find it.
Thank you. And I do see we have one question that came in the chat from Loic about, he asked, do you all have documents describing the typographical rules of your locale? So I will leave that open to all of you, but I'm curious if you do have that documentation about typographical rules for each of your languages.
By typographical, do we mean orthographical? I mean, how the words are spelled? I can give you an example, but it's in Portuguese. I'm not sure.
I think any example you have would be valuable, so go for it.
Okay. Let me post that.
And while you share, I do just see he shared an update, anything related to punctuation. And I know for the French community and the documentation I've seen, I know there's some specifics about with punctuation, spacing, quotation marks, and things like that. So yeah, if you all have that as well.
The glossary will give you also a pretty good idea, but then again, every team anything related to punctuation for languages with punctuations, we don't have that for the team.
I think the Japanese team in WordPress has that, but for Spanish, I believe we do have it only on the Spain side. Essentially, we are ruled by the same rule book, right? But there are some stuff that we don't really use in Mexico anymore. So while we don't have it set by stone, I believe it does exist.
Formally, there's a document. Because we don't, I mean, we can discuss for literally a whole day about a
Yeah, not
but it's not
exactly
written down anywhere.
yeah, documentation by itself, but like rules to follow. But I don't think, at least in Mexican Spanish, we don't have them established like that.
We don't.
I see Septimi nodding as well.
For Czech, we compiled a style guide specific to Mozilla localization. I think it was 2 years ago. But mainly, what we did was putting together like answers or guides to avoid the most common mistakes. Luckily, the Czech language is codified, and there are literally rule books that say like how you should typographically, how you should write headlines. Like sometimes, mostly in the media, this is not the case. Like sometimes it's all capitalized because that's how it's in the, like US, from the US English and so on. So it more like catches the eye. But there is like specified where you should put commas, how you should place spaces, what characters you should use for quotes. So basically, we just copied this and put it on a single place, so we can refer to that like, hey, we have this documented for anyone who is not sure. So they don't have to go and look over the internet or in books in libraries how it should actually be.
Yeah, I think documentations. I think from all of the conversations we've had today, having some sort of style guide, glossary, some documentation, since you could absolutely, I think, spend hours researching your own language for how to do things a certain way, and all of the different opinions within that. Having that decided collectively by the team and community is very helpful for a time saver, but also just for that consistency too. Right. I will put out one last call. If there's any final questions anyone has, please do share those. And in the meantime, I will just kind of, this is a very open question for all of you, but if there's anything from your experience that we didn't touch on today that you would like to share, or whether it's a tip, whether it's something that you learned in the course of this panel, is there anything else that any of you here with me would like to share before we start to wrap up?
I'd like to share something. I always like to share something. So I'd like to share this. I'd like to share the sheer wonder of people whose native language is not English, agree to come together, talk English to each other, and it becomes this kind of lingua franca. And I want to alert the native English speakers to one thing, to one very important thing that I've discovered while being on Polyglots, which is once English has become the lingua franca between all of us, it immediately loses every cultural connotation to the English-speaking world. The expressions, the jargon, the cute expressions, those all lose context. It's gone. It's out of the window. It has become a new language that sounds like English, that everybody understands, but has nothing to do with English-speaking culture. So everyone not native in English speaking English here, bravo to them, because it takes courage.
I do think that is a great note to end on. And I will also just say, for everyone here today, thank you for participating in one of the English events on that note, and being willing being willing to spend some of your time today sharing your experience and sharing that with others as well. This is streamed to YouTube, so this is a video that people can come back to in the future and review anytime. So the information and insights that you've shared today will be available and will reach people many months and many years past this event. And since I don't see any other questions, I will just wrap up here then by saying, again, just a really big thank you to all of you here on screen with me. Thank you to Hari. He's been behind the scenes. He's been managing all of the comments and banners that you see on screen. So thank you, Hari, for helping with all of that. And yeah, we have one more global live streaming event that's coming up on September 30th, and that will just be a closing party for all of the WordPress Translation Day events. And we will be grabbing together hopefully some stats so that we can share some of the tangible impact of all of these events that have happened throughout the entire month of September, how that has impacted WordPress translations. So please do join us for that. There will be a stream on YouTube, but there will also be an interactive Zoom after if you would like a chance to spend some time with with fellow polyglots as well. And with that, I think thank you all who joined, who shared comments in the chat. It was really great to see your thank yous, your insights, things that resonated with you, as well as questions as well. And with that, I will just say thanks, everyone. Please participate. Check out wptranslationday.org if you'd like to find some other ways to get involved. And have a great rest of your day or evening, whatever time it may be for you. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.